A pattern loaded with snow, ice, and the potential for severe weather on the way through at least the next week, and many folks are going to pick up on double-digit totals through much of the Northeast and even down into the Mid-Atlantic. If you're new to the channel, welcome. My name is Gerald. I'm a meteorology major at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte, and if you haven't already, go ahead and like the video, subscribe, and hit that bell for the latest notifications. It's a great way to stay up to date as we continue kind of looking ahead at this pattern that really just does not want to quit with winter weather events through much of the East. And I'll tell you, some folks that haven't gotten snow in a while could get some out of this one as we go through at least the next 7 to 10 days. Also comment, let me know where you're watching from and what you're seeing out there. And with that said, let's go ahead and dive right on into the data. Now, what you see kind of next to me here, this is the loop of our latest European forecasting model and doing a tremendous job here, I think, of showing that pattern potential. And not to get into specifics from this map, although we will later in the video, but you get the idea. Round after round after round of winter storms crossing from the Rockies through the eastern seaboard, bringing snow, ice, rain, and even the potential of a little bit of severe weather. And that's what we're going to talk about in today's video as we break it on down for you. Now, obviously the model looks exciting, but to get that stuff in the future, you got to kind of have to know what's happening right now. So let's go ahead and start by taking a look here at our current satellite loop, and I think doing an all right job at showing that overall pattern. So basically what we've got is a big upper level low here into the Pacific Northwest, and what this is doing is just cranking up this atmospheric river out of the Pacific, and that is leading to plenty of moisture being advected into the lower 48. That combined with some energy breaking off from that upper level low, we're going to get little storm systems to kind of cross the country, and I think the one that we're going to see today and tomorrow, storm number 1, as I will refer to it in today's video, it'll definitely bring impacts, but compared to what could be on the way next week, this one might seem kind of light in terms of what it's going to bring. But just know this is the overall pattern that we're dealing with, and this will continue for a pretty extended amount of time for many folks. Now, let's take a look at radar out there. Pretty quiet in the east right now. We've got maybe a little bit of light returns here along the Mason-Dixon line between kind of the Maryland and Pennsylvania area there. Some light rain back out here into Missouri, Oklahoma, Arkansas, maybe even a little bit of freezing drizzle this morning out of that. But really, the active weather remains out west into the Rockies. But don't worry, if you're a weather fan in the east, at least an exciting weather fan and a fan of winter storms, this big mess, yeah, it's going to move east throughout the day today. And by the time we're doing tomorrow morning's video, this is going to be a very different scene in this part of the country. But you can definitely see that active weather from the PNW through the northern Rockies, even up here into portions of southern Canada, into the prairies there, getting plenty of snow out of this pattern. Now, let's take a look and go ahead and talk about our current alerts, and this map has really filled in since yesterday, and I'll be honest, I don't think we're going to get much of a break between now and this time next week while taking a look at this map, but we just kind of analyze it for a second here, and you'll notice plenty of purple is kind of the first thing that's jumping out at you. These are winter weather advisories, and then this kind of darker purple here, those are ice storm warnings in effect for the mountains of Maryland, up into the Alleghenies, back down towards Snowshoe, West Virginia. Yeah, a lot of ice and snow on the way with this first storm system. Now, you'll notice not many winter storm warnings currently in the east. Now, some areas could get upgraded, but generally speaking, the storm system, like I said, compared to the next one and the one after that on the way, is not going to be as high impact of an event, and you'll see that as we run you through Futurecast. But the Pacific Northwest, like I said, also getting plenty of snow here with those winter storm warnings, winter weather advisories, including the Sierra Nevadas here, where we're going to get big-time snow totals, and then another day of fog continuing into the deep south with our gray boxes here. It has definitely been a foggy start to February for many of us down here, and today will be no different. Now, let's go ahead and start out west here because obviously our folks out there are just as important as our friends in the east. So let's talk about this snow and rain on the way this afternoon. It's going to be more of the same, folks, so not a whole lot to talk about other than just, yeah, it's going to keep on happening. We're going to get wave after wave of winter weather as these little pieces of energy roll in off the Pacific. This is later this morning and into the afternoon. You can see that snow really cranking up into the northern Rockies, back towards the Cascades, into Washington, Oregon, and even into northern California. And it's just the theme overnight tonight. Now, a more pronounced storm system on the way. You can see it moving in off the Pacific here. This gets us into Thursday afternoon. afternoon. Check it out. Heavy mountain snow into the Sierra Nevadas through Northern California. Coastal rain out of this one as it works ashore through the San Francisco Bay Area. Could even see some light rain as far south as LA, and then kind of up the coastal highway there into California, seeing some rain throughout the overnight Thursday, really starting Thursday afternoon, honestly, and then getting into the overnight and continues through the evening hours. This is when we'll really crank up on snow totals again through the Sierra Nevadas, and eventually this works into the Northern Rockies. A very snowy Friday in store for you folks. And then this breaks off from the Rockies, gets into the plains, and that'll be the start of storm number 2 in the east as we go ahead through the week, and then things calm down a little bit out west by later this weekend. Now, before we get ahead of ourselves and start talking about storm number 2, let's break down storm number 1 and kind of the impacts that we're going to see out of that. So just to give you the general setup, I've been talking about it a lot, but let me remind you once more. Basically, all this kind of energy you see here, or this vorticity as we call it in meteorology, at about halfway up the atmosphere here, this is going to produce enough lift for a storm system and kind of just a shield of precipitation through much of the Ohio Valley, the Midwest, the Great Lakes, and into the Northeast by the time we get into this evening and into tomorrow. And you can see that here as I run you through it ahead into time. This just kind of works on eastbound, gets into the Northeast by Thursday afternoon, pictured below. Another thing to know, it's actually not this storm system. You're thinking this might be what's bringing the snow. It's really actually everything out ahead of it here that's bringing the snow and the ice. But this piece of energy behind it is also important, as this will, by Friday, provide a reinforcing shot of cold air. Here we go. This is Friday morning. This could bring a secondary quick Arctic front that maybe produces some snow, some lake effect snow, but more importantly produces more cold air for our next storm later this weekend, as this could really help to kind of up the snow totals for that next event. Now, let's break this down for you, talk about the storm, talk about who's going to get what and how much of what, starting with our model here. So this is the high resolution rapid refresh model. I think doing a pretty good job of showing the storm system, and also shows the threat for some severe weather this afternoon. We'll talk about that as well. So this is later on about 12 or about noon to 1 o'clock Eastern time. Again, time above my head. I know it's in kind of small print there, but I'll try to verbalize it for you as well. So 1 p.m. February 05. Obviously that's 1 o'clock today. And by the way, I'm going to interject here because I meant to, or interject here, not interject, I don't know what that is, but interject here to talk about what today is. Today's National Weather Person's Day. So if you know somebody in the meteorology community, reach out to them, let them know, whether that be a local TV meteorologist. You can always send them an email, or send them a message on Facebook or something, or a National Weather Service person, or somebody in the private sector, or if you're just a weather fan yourself, happy National Weather Person's Day to you. And that's another segue for me to just say thank you to all of you for tuning in and watching today's video. Obviously, we've all got some sort of love for weather, so happy National Weather Person's Day to all of us. Alrighty, now back to regularly scheduled programming here. You can kind of see the idea this afternoon. Nothing crazy until this evening. That's when this storm begins to blow up a little bit. Look at this low pressure developing back towards South Dakota, Nebraska. Yeah, we've got snow breaking out into Minnesota, the Dakotas, and then you look towards the east, and this is when some of that icy mix begins into portions of northern Illinois, through Iowa, into the Chicago area, Gary, and then to the south of there, all rain, including a small severe weather threat down here into sections of Kentucky, Tennessee, the Ohio River Valley. Not a huge threat today, but a couple tornadoes not out of the question, and something you're going to need to be prepared for. So I told you it was an active pattern. We've got it all on the screen here. Severe weather, ice here in the middle, and then snow to the north, and all of it's going to work through the country and towards the east during the overnight tonight into tomorrow. By the way, I'll be live tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern, with a special guest who is an incredible weather forecaster in the Northeast, so you're going to want to tune in for that as we break down this storm and the next storms in even more detail. But for now, let's keep on moving this ahead. So through the evening of tonight, I think all rain through the southern half of Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, even into West Virginia, outside of the higher terrain, specifically those eastern facing slopes that are going to be kind of affected by the cold air damming. But you start getting north towards Cleveland, again, northern Indiana into southern Michigan, and then into Pennsylvania, the DMV, and into New Jersey. This is where ice will become a concern overnight tonight. And I think that'll really cause a lot of havoc on tomorrow morning's morning commute here through the east. So you see that continuing ahead. We've got snow, ice, and just an absolute mess here into the Northeast by Thursday morning. And I think this is going to be a very interesting setup to watch. Sorry, here during the morning hours of Thursday. Like I said, morning commute could be a real concern. It's going to be one of those storms where it's kind of transitioning throughout the day. So you might start as a heavy thump of snow in Philadelphia, Scranton, northern New Jersey, even New York City through really much of the Hudson Valley. And then throughout the day, this kind of cold air is going to slowly dwindle, starting in the upper layers and then towards the surface. So what starts as snow and could very quickly drop a couple of inches transitions to sleet and then freezing rain and kind of rain. Now, another thing to watch is this little dry slot you see showing up there into the I-95. Does that kind of stop that transition, and does it really just stay snow most of the time and then become just some freezing drizzle throughout the day? That's another possibility, but what I want to really hit home here is how quick hitting of event this is. I mean, it really starts about 2, 3, 4 a.m. For many of us, and then it's gone and out of here by, this is 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's already out of Pennsylvania by that point. So this is not a huge 12-hour, 24-hour long type storm event, but it is going to be a potent, quick hitting storm. You can see that snow even up towards Boston, Connecticut, Rhode Island, into upstate New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, and then into the state of Maine by Thursday afternoon. And then by Thursday evening, folks, I mean, it's getting out of here. And then here comes that reinforcing shot of cold air by Friday morning. That could produce some snow squalls, and we'll watch for that and talk about that a little bit more ahead into time. And then you can even see some showers here behind the storm along kind of a weak frontal boundary back into the Tennessee River Valley. So that's the storm system. Quick hitting but potent storm. Let's talk about totals now and tell you how much is on the way for wherever you may be watching. And we'll start up here into the northern plains. Not a ton of snow, but if you're watching in North Dakota, specifically closer to the Canadian border, could get a couple of inches. And then you start getting towards Minnesota. That's where we will see significantly more snow. Trust me, it's been a long week. A lot of homework assignments due this week. So if I slip up some words, you'll have to forgive me running on a pretty low amount of sleep. But Minnesota, definitely going to get some pretty good snow out of this one, especially into the Ely area. I think I pronounced it right that time. I promise I read the comments. I had multiple people, I think, say that's how you pronounce it. So I'll try to remember that into this section of Minnesota. And somebody even told me what that is called. I called it the Beak yesterday. Definitely not the Beak. But either way, that area into the Ely area, going to get some pretty good snow. Potentially half a foot is going to be a pretty good average. And then you get down towards the Twin Cities. Kind of a tough little gradient there to forecast, but really from nothing to upwards of a couple of inches of snow looks pretty possible in that region. Now let's move it east a little bit, where ice will be a bigger concern from Iowa into Chicago, Indiana, and Ohio. This is the forecast straight from the National Weather Service. Really a glaze to a tenth of an inch for most of us into Wisconsin, Iowa, northern Missouri, and then through the Chicago area. That's enough to cause problems on the roadways. Not so much power outages or, big infrastructural issues with that amount of ice, but definitely enough to cause slick conditions on the road. So be careful in there. Then you get in this next box, I'm going to draw in yellow a little bit further east here into southern Michigan, into kind of northeastern Indiana and the northern half of Ohio. This is where it's going to be more of a tenth of an inch to 2/10 of an inch of ice. And that's where you run into higher end road impacts and maybe even the chance for a power outage or two. Now, not a super long-lasting event, so that'll help with the power outages. This ice isn't going to keep falling forever. Again, kind of a quick hitting event, so that's the good news. But that's enough ice to definitely cause concerns there for our folks in Ohio, into even up towards the Detroit area, back down into northern Indiana there. And then we go even I guess before we go further east, let's talk about snow in this region, but we go further north and look at the snow. Not an ice concern in the UP or northern Wisconsin, all snow there. And I think in here we could get a pretty good little event. Again, for a quick hitting one, a good 2 to 4 plus inches of snow. You start getting up on the northern shores of the UP, where you're going to get some lake effect combined with this event. That's where we could see half a foot to a foot of snow in some of those areas. And then the northern kind of mitten of Michigan getting about 1 to 3 inches there in that region. And cannot rule out a dusting to half an inch of some sleet or snow back down towards central Michigan and even into central Wisconsin towards the Green Bay area and kind of north of Milwaukee there. That corridor could get a little bit of snow, but you really want to be in the northern half of these states to get anything that I would consider appreciable. Now, what about further east? This is where the ice will be a bigger concern. And remember from earlier, This is even where we have ice storm warnings in effect for the mountains of West Virginia, into the Alleghenies, the mountains of Western Maryland, and right into this region. That's where we're watching the potential for maybe a quarter of an inch plus of ice. That could be a quarter of an inch to a half an inch. And that would be more than enough to cause just widespread, nearly impossible travel and some power outages. So you need to watch that, especially on these windy mountain roads. Trust me, as somebody who grew up right at the foothills of the Appalachia chain, it does not take much ice to kind of make your car slide off the road and potentially really off the road if you're on, again, one of those windy kind of mountain roads. So be careful. Just don't travel if you don't have to. And even back into the DC area, where maybe the roads might be a little bit better, still going to see a glaze to a tenth of an inch of ice. And remember, that's enough to cause travel issues. Now, you get further north into Pennsylvania, once you get up towards Scranton, Philly, and into New Jersey, this is going to be that transitional zone where if you're lucky, it might really be more snow than anything, and then a little bit of light freezing drizzle as the storm winds down. And you can see that on the snowfall forecast. National Weather Service here going for about an inch in Philly, about an inch in Scranton. They start getting up into northern New Jersey, into New York City, maybe 1.5 to 2 inches of snow as you get that nice thumping of snow during the early morning tomorrow. And then you get back down towards DC, really going to be more of an ice event, maybe some sleet that tries to accumulate to a tenth of an inch, maybe 2/10 of an inch. But the real snow winners in the Northeast are going to be further north. Boston northbound into Concord, into portions of Vermont there through Montpelier, Portland, the down east areas of Maine, really the entire state of Maine. Going to see a good little snow event here. I think that circled area on your map going to be a nice little 2 to 5 inch type snow event. So some folks, especially in those higher terrains, going to get closer to 5 inches. Other folks who are maybe deal with a dry slot or so are going to be closer to 2 inches. So that's kind of the forecast here. And I would even include kind of coastal sections here into Connecticut, Rhode Island, southern Mass, maybe more of a 1 to 3 inch type event down there. But nonetheless, a good little snow event. And like I said, this is kind of the quick hitting appetizer for what's to come on down the road. And that segues us perfectly into the next storm system. So I told you, it's going to be a train. This is going to be a loaded pattern of winter weather events. That's storm number 1. Again, that's kind of tonight into tomorrow. Now let's talk about storm number 2. That'll be this weekend. And then we'll talk about storm number 3, and that'll be early next week. And storm number 3 could be a real doozy, trust me. So you're going to want to stay tuned for the end of the video. All right, setup for storm number 2. Folks, it's the exact same setup. Now, this is Thursday afternoon. At this point, again, the storm kind of working through the Northeast, this area of increased vorticity you see on your map getting on out of here. And then behind it, here's that kind of secondary Arctic front that I told you about. That could work through Friday, again, bringing maybe a couple snow squalls here. That kind of gets through, brings the colder air, brings that snow squall potential. And then look what's happening back west, another storm cranking up. This is what we looked at earlier when I showed you the West Coast, and I said this would be storm number 2 eventually. Yeah, here it is on the map, working through the Rockies. This is Friday evening. And then by the time we get further ahead into time, getting into Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, and eventually overnight Saturday and into Sunday, crossing through the Northeast, the Midwest, the Great Lakes, the Ohio Valley, and bringing some pretty impactful weather with it. So with that said, let's break it down for you. This is the latest GFS model. I think doing a pretty good job. Now, this is Friday morning. I'm showing you this just to give you an idea here. Again, tonight into tomorrow, that's the busy day for the Northeast. Then Friday rolls around and a little bit quieter. Now we could see some showers in the deep south. By the way, talk about spring fever. We broke record highs yesterday. Charlotte Douglas International Airport got to 79 degrees. That broke the old record for February 4th of 76 degrees. Columbia tied a record of, I think, 80, 81, 82, something like that. Raleigh, I think, broke a record. So yeah, spring fever, I told you it was coming. It was here yesterday, and it will stay here through likely this weekend. Then next week is when that spring fever could kind of come to an end a little bit for some of us, and we'll talk about that, but just kind of wanted to interject here and throw that kind of statistic out there for you, so hopefully you enjoyed it. Now, like I said, Friday afternoon, pretty quiet, couple showers in the deep south, not a big deal, and there's those snow squall potential up into the interior Northeast. This would be Friday afternoon, like I said, and kind of like I mentioned earlier. Then we kind of keep on going ahead into time, and here comes the bigger show, Saturday morning. You can see that storm developing. We've got good snow up into the northern plains, through the Midwest. We've got rain still through Virginia, Kentucky, the Ohio Valley. And then we move this further ahead into time. Nice little winter storm from Michigan, Wisconsin, and maybe the Chicago area can get a little bit of snow. And then the storm really cranks up, I think. This is by Saturday evening and getting into the overnight. Now, maybe a severe weather threat with this as well. This one is a stronger low pressure. This is going to have stronger fronts with it, which is good and bad news. for snow lovers. The good news is if you're getting snow, you're going to get more snow. It's going to be a slightly longer lasting event. There's going to be a little bit more lift with that warm air advection. So we're going to get better snowfall rates. However, the caveat with that is the stronger of a storm you get, and here's kind of where our warm front is located. Watch what happens. And here's our cold front as well. I'll kind of draw that as well. And the lines are not going to move with it. But just in general, watch where the fronts are and notice kind of what happens. As we go ahead, front's in about the same place. And then, well, it kind of stays the same on the GFS, so this wasn't a great example, but I'll show you the European next. The problem you could run into with this is that warm front may try to lift far enough north. As the storm gets stronger, that warm front generally kind of pushes further and further north, so that could increase mixing issues for especially places like Philadelphia, New York City, and potentially a place like Boston. Boston also has the potential to be in that sweet spot with the highest amount of lift and kind of still being on the all-snow side of the storm system. So that's what we'll watch. That's what we'll see and kind of monitor the trends on. But let me back it up for you again. This is Saturday evening. Overnight Saturday, a full-blown kind of snowstorm here into the northeast from Boston, Rhode Island, Connecticut, even mostly snow event there into New York City. Kind of starts as some snow, transitions to ice and rain in Philadelphia, southern New Jersey. Looks like mainly rain in Baltimore and D.C. with this one, but that's a nice band of snow on the northern end, and that's a couple of hours. That's, let's see, for a place like Connecticut, for example, this would start maybe 8, 9 p.m. on Saturday and wouldn't let up until about 7, 8 a.m. The next morning. So nearly 12 hours of some pretty moderate snowfall. That would be enough to get some good totals out of it on the GFS model there. Now let me show you the European. I think it's going to show that problem potentially a little bit better. That's the first storm we just, no, that's the storm actually. Here we go. This is the right storm. So it kind of starts the same. I'm going to move it ahead into time a little bit. Again, the same really for Michigan, Wisconsin, states like that. But notice a little bit further north, the storm's a little bit stronger. Also, the cold front on this one's a bit stronger. This would bring a higher end severe weather threat through Kentucky, Tennessee, some of the same places that might see it today. Watch out come Saturday and into Sunday. That's a feisty looking little squall line there that could produce plenty of severe weather. We'll watch it and again keep you up to date on it. But the European, a little bit further north here, it still looks like a just absolutely puking snow, as I say, into the interior of the Northeast, specifically Vermont, New Hampshire, Western Mass here. But then that warm front gets far enough north. We change over to rain in New York City, rain and ice for much of Connecticut, Rhode Island, even causes some mixing issues in Boston on the European, but it's a stronger storm. So the winds would be stronger, the lift would be greater, and again, whoever is getting all snow would get plenty of it. But if you got those mixing issues, that's something to watch. And then heck, this gets down to about 985, 990 by the time it's pulling off the coast and would really bring more nor'easter-like impacts into Maine and then eventually through Nova Scotia there, and then gets on out of here by Sunday night and into Monday. So obviously a difference between the models. Let's take a look at potential snow out of this one. Again, it's too soon to give you exact totals, but we can give you a little teaser, if you will. And we'll start with the freezing rain threat. Again, this one will have an icing threat. The European ensembles really highlight the same areas that are getting it today. Southern Michigan, northern Ohio, and then a bullseye right through Pennsylvania, really just about the entire state, specifically kind of the central part of the state. State College, Harrisburg, back over towards Allentown into northern New Jersey, and then kind of those suburbs north of Pittsburgh potentially getting in on that ice, and even a small ice signal down again into those areas of West Virginia. But I think this storm will be a little bit further north than today's storm, a little bit warmer, more so than being further north, as it's going to be stronger. Again, that increases the warm air advection, that gets that rain snow line further north. So we'll watch for that. But Pennsylvania does look like to be another hot spot in the ice, kind of the ice world here, if you will, by Saturday into Sunday. And then you can see that ice signal dwindles down a little bit as the storm pulls away. Now, what about snow? Let's talk about that. Now, this is not a percent chance of snow. Normally, I show you that. I'm going to be a little nicer today and give you kind of the mean snowfall average, or just the average. You don't have to say the mean average, just the average of snow between the ensembles here. And you notice by Saturday, a nice little swath of snow here into the Dakotas. This one could be better for the Twin Cities. The storm kind of today, a little bit to your north. This one could be a tad bit better for you, maybe a little bit further south. And then that snow signal gets into Wisconsin, Michigan looks pretty good. And then check out the Northeast, folks. So we talk about Boston already running an average of about half a foot of snow. And then you go up towards southern New Hampshire, nearly half a foot to a foot of snow in the mean here. And that's a good sign for snow lovers in here. I really do think with this second storm right in this circled area could be the real winners out of it, from the down east areas of Maine through upstate New York into northern Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire. I think that's a sweet spot with this second storm, but could even see snow again further south through Connecticut, Rhode Island, New York City, northern New Jersey. I think Philadelphia is going to be a little far south for anything big out of this one. But again, you go north, specifically north of New York City, into the interior, going to have a higher chance of impactful snow out of storm number 2. All right, that's storm number 2. What about storm number 3? Let's talk about that one now. And then I'll let you go because this video is already going a lot longer than I had hoped for. But here we go. This is from the Weather Prediction Center, and they've already highlighted a day 7 area. So this will be about next Tuesday or so for winter weather chances. And notice already a 50 to a 70% chance of significant winter storm criteria, I would say. And again, the map's a little different than exactly that, but if you're kind of just getting a general idea of what this map means, that is a 50 to 70% area probability of a pretty good winter storm by early next week. And that includes DC, Baltimore, up into Philadelphia, back down towards Blacksburg, Virginia, into the mountains of West Virginia and Virginia. That's a good signal. And you go even outside of there, southern New England, back down even into the foothills of North Carolina and Virginia, also running an all right probability of some big winter weather potential. So that's straight from the experts. It's not just from some college kid who's taken a couple classes, or at this point more than a couple classes, but again, this is straight from the degreed experts who have worked there for decades probably. So that's a good sign. Now let's talk about the setup a little bit. What's different with this one? Why is there a different area being highlighted? Well, it has to do with the energy that's coming ashore. And here it is. This is Sunday morning. Look back here towards California. This is our storm system. Remember, the 2 before it really worked in further north, kind of like this. This one going to do the same thing, but further south. So instead of starting that far north, it's going to kind of do something like this. Which is going to give areas further south a higher in chance of some winter weather. And you can see that here. I'll kind of move it ahead into time for you. Just to give you an idea, there it is in California, the Four Corners. Energy really digs south and then kind of ejects northward right through the Ohio Valley. And then notice behind it, another thing to note with this setup is this might be, storm number 3 might kind of be storm number 3 and 4 and 5 kind of all clumped together. Notice how there's waves of energy here along this. So this could be a very classic overrunning event, as we call it, meaning it's just wave after wave of winter weather by the early and middle part of next week through portions of the mid-Atlantic and Northeast, and you can see that pretty well on our model. So here's a GFS Sunday afternoon. Again, storm number 2 out of here by this point, and then storm number 3 beginning. A nice snow event through DC, back really into just much of northern Virginia, the Delmarva, into the Northeast, and then it's all rain for North Carolina, South Carolina on this model run. They did trend a little bit further north and a little bit warmer overnight, I will tell you that. But again, a week away, this could trend south again. And generally speaking, the cold air damming that would produce the winter weather areas that far south usually is a little stronger than the models project. So I would watch for some ice concerns down here into southern Virginia, Danville, Greensboro, the Hickory area, maybe even as far south as the Highway 11 corridor of upstate South Carolina. I'd watch those areas for an ice potential next week. Now, not set in stone. I'll show you the ensembles in a minute, but the real snow chances, I think, are going to be further north towards DC, the DMV, the Delmarva. And like I said, I talked about waves. Here's one wave. Then it kind of dies down a little bit, and here comes another wave of winter weather. This one even getting the Ohio Valley involved, back towards Kansas, Missouri, and maybe a little bit of a severe weather potential. Like I said, we've got plenty of energy and plenty of moisture down here into the deep south. Now, this would be a real classic Dixie Alley type event, and right now we're lacking a strong centralized low pressure system to really get the ball rolling. So we'll see if that can come into play later on. And then that second piece of energy, that's a really nice overrunning event. This is Tuesday afternoon. That's a nice I-95 snowstorm, folks, including the beaches and all on the GFS, and then it kind of clears out a little bit, or does it? Another area of overrunning by next week. So I'll tell you, folks, next week just looks absolutely loaded. I'm just going to call all of next week Storm 3. It could be Storm 3, 4, 5, and 6 if you want to word it like that. But it looks very active with this overrunning type event. Again, it's that tropical spring-like conditions overrunning those Arctic winter-like conditions, and that's what's leading to it. Now, what about the European model? Same thing, really. Here's the first wave of winter precipitation. This one, now, this will be a bigger severe weather threat again on the European. It's got a stronger surface low pressure down here near Mississippi, Alabama. You can see this kind of squall line feature here by Tuesday into Wednesday. Again, we'll watch it, see what happens, but it's a nice winter weather event for the Northeast. Again, that's wave kind of 1 and 2. Then here comes wave 3 and 4-ish. And then after that, a whole nother storm system out in the long range. So a very active pattern on both models. And I think that leads us good enough into the ensembles here and show you kind of the probabilities here. So what about freezing rain? Let's start with that potential. the chance of, I'd say a appreciable amount of freezing rain here. Well, the biggest signal is kind of right into this region. Now, it's going to be the Ohio Valley. Now, this time a little bit further south. So the first two storms we talked about, northern Ohio, northern Illinois, northern Indiana. This time the southern half of those states, down into Kentucky, maybe the Ozarks could get some ice out of this. And then you see Virginia, and I'm still watching the foothills of North Carolina. Again, Greensboro, Winston-Salem, over towards High Point, Hickory, Boone, maybe as far south as kind of the Charlotte area, areas like Huntersville. The further north and west you go from the city towards Hickory, the higher chance you'd have running into ice concerns. And then there is a non-zero chance, but we'll watch it down here into maybe the Highway 11 corridor of upstate South Carolina, the mountains of North Carolina. We'll watch those areas as well. And again, this is just freezing rain on this map. Pretty good signal there into Virginia as well for some freezing rain. And then this time, not going to get too far north, but again, to note, look at how it's kind of wave of freezing rain. 1 wave, 2 wave, and then kind of 3 wave, 4 wave. So this isn't going to be a perfect one storm event next week, I think. I think it's going to be kind of a messy day after day after day thing that will eventually pile up to some pretty big snowfall totals. And here's why. This is a chance of at least an inch of snow falling. Look at this huge signal kind of blow up here by next Tuesday or so through Philadelphia, New Jersey, New York City, back towards DC, Baltimore. Lower chances today than it was yesterday, I'll admit, down here towards North Carolina, Danville, Virginia Beach, but we're a week away. Could this trend back south? Absolutely it could. And that's something we'll continue to watch. Then a pretty good signal through the Ohio Valley as well. Again, maybe Cincinnati, up towards Louisville, into Indianapolis. St. Louis could potentially get some snow out of this pattern. And same thing. So we kind of wave after wave. So there's one big wave, kind of a secondary wave there, and then maybe a third wave by the time we get way on out into time. So it's an active pattern for sure. Final thing we'll talk about are temperatures. Is the spring fever going to last much longer? Is it almost gone? What's the story there? Well, here we go. This is this afternoon, warm in the deep south. Now, watching for a little bit of cold air damming today into North Carolina, Virginia. That could cut down on your temperatures. We'll see how well that does or how much it over and or underperforms. And then the Northeast looks pretty cool as well today. This weekend, though, we're going to warm up pretty good ahead of that kind of Friday Arctic shot of air. I think tomorrow into Friday morning, going to be pretty warm for most of us. Then we get to Friday afternoon and into Saturday. It's a classic clash of seasons here, folks. We're about average to below average in the Northeast, well below average into the PNW, and then we are just absolutely roasting in the deep South by Saturday into Sunday. And then next week, that cold air tries to beat back down that warmer air, and this is why we have higher end winter weather chances further south by next Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And you kind of see that leading on. And then there are signs of maybe a bit of an Arctic outbreak the middle of the month. You kind of see this time frame into the east. We'll see. And then you just kind of see, in general, the pattern continues. The warm air and the cold air keep fighting it out and arguing over who's going to be kind of the top dog through the month of February. Alrighty, folks, so that's all I got for you. Again, if you haven't already, go ahead, like the video, subscribe, and hit that bell for the latest notifications. And once more, happy Weather Person's Day, and come back tonight for the live stream at 7 p.m. Again, I'll have a special guest on, and very excited for that. He's a real whiz with Northeast weather forecasting, so especially if you're up in that area, you're going to want to hear from him. Alrighty, y'all have a great one. Stay safe, stay warm, and I'll see you all tonight.